So, Catherine, Princess of Wales, broke down on live TV this week. And the reason was not some fancy speech or royal emotion getting the better of her. It was because her daughter, Princess Charlotte, pulled a palace document out of her coat and basically set off a family secret about Princess Diana's anniversary tribute. The really wild part is not even what Charlotte read out loud. It is the handwritten sentence at the bottom of the page that she refused to read because she said it would hurt her mother too much. That sentence, the one she folded over and covered with her thumb, is the key to understanding why Catherine has been walking around looking broken for weeks. That is where this gets weird, because the timeline does not add up and the official explanations from Camilla's side are already falling apart under the weight of their own contradictions. Before we go any further, if you like royal family news and the stories behind the headlines, make sure you hit that subscribe button for Crown Insider Report. We break down these situations as they develop. And trust me, this one is moving fast. Let us go back to the beginning, because the story Charlotte told on that stage did not start that morning. It started 8 weeks earlier in a planning room where Catherine was sitting with a folder marked for the 30th anniversary of Princess Diana's passing. From what we understand, Catherine wanted the ceremony to be different. She did not want another cold, formal event with distant speeches and polished language. She wanted warmth and memory. She had spent days going through charity records, old photographs, notes, and speeches. Her plan was simple on the surface. 30 white roses, one for every year since Diana died, placed beside the statue in the sunken garden at Kensington Palace. Catherine thought that move would return the day to the people Diana cared about. Then there was the film, a short piece with no grand music or heavy narration, just images of Diana listening, laughing, kneeling beside children, walking into rooms other people avoided. Catherine insisted the final part should focus on impact, not titles. And Charlotte had a role, too. She was going to carry the final rose. At first, Catherine hesitated because she did not want her daughter used as a symbol before she was ready. William agreed. So Catherine asked Charlotte privately, away from staff and cameras, and Charlotte said yes. She had never met Diana, but she grew up on family stories, the jokes, the stubbornness, the way Diana could make a formal room feel less formal. Charlotte wanted to read a few lines about learning kindness from a grandmother she knew through other people's memories. William listened to the rehearsal without interrupting, and when she finished, he said it felt like the tribute his mother should have received years ago. Everything was approved. The order was reviewed. Timings checked. Security raised no objections. And the film moved into final editing. That should have been the end of it. But then a second folder arrived. The title sounded harmless, something like ceremonial harmonization and protocol amendments. Dry language meant to discourage questions. The first page mentioned timing. The second talked about balance between royal households. The third mentioned avoiding duplication. But the real changes were on page 4. Catherine's introduction had been removed. Charlotte's final rose spot was handed to someone else. The Diana film was replaced with a wider part honoring women of royal service. And final approval was moved away from Catherine's team. 4 changes, 4 cuts, 1 message. Catherine read that page 3 times looking for an explanation and there was not one. Diana's name was not erased. That would have been too obvious. Instead, her presence was reduced, softened, folded into something safer and less specific. When Catherine asked who said yes to the revision, the answer came carefully. The request had moved through Camilla's household. Nobody blamed anyone directly, but the document had already done the talking. Catherine objected in private. She explained that the original tribute had been approved, charities had been contacted, and Charlotte had practiced her part. She was told the new program would better show unity and keep the anniversary from being tied to one branch of the family. Then came the warning. If Catherine pushed back too hard, the fight could leak. It could be shown as a fight over Diana. Worse, it could be framed as Catherine using the anniversary to strengthen her spot beside William. And that was the trap. Fight back and the tribute becomes a palace war. Stay quiet and months of work disappear. Catherine chose silence, not because she agreed, not because the changes did not hurt, but because protecting Diana's memory from another public argument mattered more than protecting her own pride. Now, this is where the story gets even stranger. Because the folder reached Charlotte 18 days before the broadcast. It arrived with her papers for the Royal Youth Legacy Forum, tucked under her speech draft. A cream card, a palace crest, a neat ribbon around the pages. Charlotte opened it after dinner. Most of the material was familiar. Timings, seating, notes about where to stand and when to move. But then a folded sheet slipped out from between 2 pages and fell near her chair. It was not meant for her. The heading used that same dry language Catherine had seen weeks earlier, but this copy was different. It had handwritten marks, initials near the bottom, and a later circulation code. Charlotte read the first change. Her name had been crossed out beside the final rose placement. She read the second. Catherine's introduction had been reduced to a welcome. Then the third, the film about Diana's charity work, had been removed. Charlotte did not understand every line, but she understood enough. Someone had taken the ceremony her mother built and changed it piece by piece. Not because of timing, not because of security. The paper showed something planned on purpose. One note talked about keeping proper distance between future representatives and past emotional associations. Charlotte read that sentence twice. Future representatives, past emotional associations. It sounded polite, but it felt cruel. She turned the page over and found another mark in darker ink. The lower part had been folded inward. She opened it carefully. Catherine was to have no final approval. Charlotte's place was to be handed to someone else. The Diana part was to be brought under the Queen's household, and under those instructions sat one unfinished handwritten line that made Charlotte freeze. Diana must not be allowed to. The sentence ended where the fold had torn across the page. Charlotte stared at it. That was when the pieces came together. Catherine's quick smile, the given-up rose, the cancelled rehearsal, the way William had gone quiet when the anniversary program came up. This was not a routine fix. It was a warning. Charlotte put the document back inside the folder, then changed her mind. If she returned it, someone could remove it. If she asked a member of staff, the page could disappear. So she carried it upstairs and slipped it inside a book. For 3 nights, she said nothing. During the day, she watched her mother. Catherine attended meetings, answered questions, and smiled through public appearances. But small details gave her away. She stopped mentioning the film. She avoided Charlotte's questions about the rose ceremony. Once she closed the program when Charlotte entered. Charlotte finally asked her directly if someone had forced her to give up the tribute. Catherine did not answer at once. She looked toward the window, then told Charlotte that duty sometimes meant accepting decisions that felt deeply unfair. Charlotte asked whether that made the decision right. Catherine said no. That single word changed everything. Because until then, Charlotte had hoped there might be an explanation, a scheduling issue, a misunderstanding, a decision made without realizing how much it would hurt. But Catherine's answer took away that comfort. She knew it was wrong and she was still protecting the people who had done it. Charlotte nearly showed her the note, but Catherine looked exhausted and Charlotte feared the page would deepen the wound, so she kept it hidden while trying to understand who had written the unfinished line. The initials led back to a senior office inside Camilla's household. That connection carried its own weight. A tribute centered on Diana, opened by Catherine and finished by Charlotte, would create a picture no rules could control. Diana's memory would move from William to Catherine, then into the next generation through Charlotte. Camilla would hold the title, but Diana would hold the moment. Someone understood that. Someone feared it, and someone decided to move Catherine and Charlotte away from the center before the cameras arrived. 3 days before the broadcast, Charlotte received a new version of her speech. The final note about Diana had been removed. No explanation, no replacement line, just an empty jump from Catherine's influence to royal service. Charlotte read the speech once, then placed it beside the hidden document. That was the moment her decision became final. On the morning of the forum, she folded the note into the inside pocket of her coat. She still did not know whether she would show it. She only knew she would not leave it behind. At Kensington Palace, Catherine adjusted Charlotte's collar and told her not to be nervous. Charlotte looked at her mother and said she was not nervous anymore. Catherine smiled, not knowing what that answer meant. Minutes later, Charlotte stepped toward the stage carrying 2 speeches, the one approved by the palace and the one she had decided to give. At 11 o'clock that morning, the Royal Youth Legacy Forum began beside the sunken garden. Young guests faced a stage framed with white flowers. Cameras lined the outer path. Reporters expected a polished talk about service, family influence, and responsibility. Nothing appeared unusual. Yet, under Charlotte's coat sat the one page able to turn a ceremonial morning into a family showdown no palace official had prepared to handle. Catherine sat in the front row with William beside her. She looked calm, though she kept glancing toward Charlotte's coat. Charlotte had refused to remove it before walking on stage, and Catherine thought she was cold. At 11:18, Charlotte approached the lectern. The opening followed the approved plan. She thanked the youth groups attending. She spoke about kindness, discipline, and the example set by women who served without demanding attention. Her voice stayed steady. Her hands rested on the pages. Then she turned to Catherine. Charlotte described a mother who entered every room thinking first about the people nobody else had noticed. Catherine smiled. The audience clapped. William looked toward his wife with quiet pride. The speech should have ended there. It did not. Charlotte lowered her eyes to the final part, the one rewritten days earlier. She read the first sentence, stopped halfway through the second, and fell silent. 5 seconds passed. The moderator moved in her chair, ready to go on. A producer raised one hand near the cameras. William's expression sharpened. Charlotte moved the approved speech aside. The sound of paper sliding across the lectern seemed very loud. She said there was something she had been told not to talk about because it belonged inside the family. Then she added that silence had already caused enough pain. Catherine's smile disappeared. Charlotte reached into her coat. At 11:24, she unfolded the palace note. A murmur moved through the audience. The crest was visible. Catherine recognized the document immediately, not because she had seen that exact copy, but because she knew the format, the spacing, the dark ink. She whispered Charlotte's name. Charlotte looked straight at her mother and said the anniversary tribute for Diana had not simply been adjusted. It had been taken apart. Catherine's introduction was gone. The film had been removed. Charlotte's place beside the final rose was handed to someone else. Approval had been taken from the household that made the ceremony. The cameras turned toward Catherine. She froze. Charlotte went on. She explained that she had found the note among her briefing papers and kept it hidden for 18 days. She had watched her mother smile in public while knowing that months of work had been taken away without argument, explanation, or anyone asking what it cost her. Catherine shook her head once. The word stop never left her mouth, but Charlotte understood it. She did not stop. She said her mother had protected the family by staying quiet. She said the family had not protected her mother in return. That sentence changed the room. William leaned forward, his hands locked. The moderator looked toward production. A camera moved closer. Nobody wanted to interrupt, yet nobody knew how far Charlotte meant to go. Then Charlotte left the lectern. She walked toward Catherine, holding the note with both hands. Each step slowed. Catherine rose before Charlotte reached her, maybe to shield her from the cameras, maybe to take the paper before more was said. Charlotte placed it in her hands. Catherine looked down. Her eyes passed over the typed words, then stopped at the handwriting below. Her breath caught. One hand rose toward her face. She turned a little, trying to recover, but the feeling came too fast. The tears came, not because Charlotte had embarrassed her, but because Charlotte had known. For 18 days, her daughter had carried an adult secret, studied every silence, waited for someone else to defend the woman who defended everyone around her. Catherine pressed the note against her chest. Charlotte reached for her free hand. William stayed seated for another second, staring at the lower edge of the page. Something was folded underneath, a hidden line. Charlotte saw him notice. She put his thumb across the fold and told the audience there was one sentence she refused to read. Not there, not in front of her mother. The words, she said, were too personal, and once spoken in public, they could never be taken back. The room stopped completely. No applause, no music, only Catherine steadying herself beside Charlotte. A producer signaled for the moderator to move on. The moderator ignored it. William rose. He did not take the note from Catherine. He asked Charlotte one question, quietly enough for nearby microphones to catch it. Was this the only copy? Charlotte answered that she did not know. That answer changed his face, because a single page could be dismissed. A misplaced draft could be denied. A handwritten order could be blamed on one careless official, but another copy would mean circulation. Another copy would mean intent. When the broadcast ended minutes later, William ordered every file tied to Diana's tribute secured before anyone left the building. Emails, drafts, access records, handwritten notes. Nothing was to be deleted, moved, or rewritten. Camilla's household had not answered yet. Princess and had not yet entered the story. Catherine still had not unfolded the final line. But by noon, one thing was clear. Charlotte had not only broken palace silence. She had opened an investigation. The doors closed behind the family at 11:41. Outside, reporters shouted questions across the courtyard. Inside, the sound vanished. Catherine stood near a narrow window, still holding the folded note. Charlotte stayed beside her as the weight of what she had done began to settle. William asked everyone else to leave. Catherine turned first. Her voice was controlled, but hurt sat under every word. She asked why Charlotte had carried the page alone for so long. Why she had not trusted either parent, why she had chosen a live audience instead of a private room. Charlotte did not defend the broadcast. She defended the reason. She said she feared the note would vanish. She had watched approved plans change, objections soften into silence, and details disappear. For 18 days, she waited for an adult to fix what had happened. No one did. That answer hit harder than any public accusation, because it was true. Catherine had tried to protect Charlotte from the fight, but had left her alone with the evidence. William held out his hand. Catherine gave him the note. He did not read it like a husband studying something that had wounded his wife. He read it like an investigator, searching for the moment a story stopped making sense. The circulation code came first, then the timestamp, then the initials. The page had been made 6 days after the original program got final approval. That destroyed the easiest explanation. It could not have been an early proposal. It had been made after the tribute was settled. William asked where Charlotte found it. She described the folder and its spot between her speech pages. At 11:49, he called his private secretary. Every record linked to the anniversary program was to be preserved. Drafts, emails, access logs, version histories, handwritten notes, even thrown-away pages were to stay untouched. No one was to tidy anything. Inside royal households, awkward mistakes can disappear under cleaner language and newer paperwork. William was blocking that escape before anyone knew they needed one. Camilla's office answered 12 minutes later. The note, they said, seemed to be a working document from an early talk. It had never stood for a final decision and should not have reached Charlotte's folder. That sounds reasonable, right? Except William put the note on the table and pointed at the date. Nobody answered. By afternoon, officials said the circulation number was wrong and the handwriting belonged to a junior planner. Each answer pushed responsibility further down. Then Princess Anne arrived. She did not start with Catherine's tears or Charlotte's speech. She asked for the document index. A motion could be debated, but procedure could not. She examined the code and asked for the master register used by the ceremonial office. The room changed when she found the matching entry. Charlotte's copy belonged to the 4th distribution round. Not the 1st, not early. The 4th. That means this document had been circulated many times, meaning it was not a draft sitting in a drawer. It had been moved through the system. So when Camilla's people tried to say it was an early idea that never went anywhere, the paperwork itself said otherwise. That is the contradiction that really matters here. You cannot say something was never a final decision when the circulation log shows it going through 4 separate rounds after the original program was already approved. And asked where the 3rd and 4th round files were kept. A clerk led her to a locked archive below the planning offices. One spot in the Diana anniversary section was empty. A file had been taken, but whoever took it had missed something. Behind an older program sat a thin extra folder with no label. And opened it and found another copy of the changed order. Same removals, same reassignment, same move of power, a later timestamp, a senior household approval mark, and the whole handwritten sentence, and went back upstairs without saying what she had found. She put both pages side by side in front of William. The first had only the start, the second finished the thought. Catherine looked at Charlotte. Charlotte lowered her eyes. She had seen enough of the line to understand why her mother would be hurt, but not enough to know how directly it aimed at them both. And tapped the approval mark once. "This was not discussion," she said. "This was an order." William read the sentence without moving. Then he read it again, slower. His anger did not show as shouting. It showed as stillness. Camilla's people insisted no final approval had been given, and turned the second page toward them and asked why a thrown-out idea carried a late circulation number, an approval mark, and orders to replace an approved program. No one answered. William folded the pages together and said the handwriting would be checked. The access logs would show who entered the archive. The missing folder would be traced. Until that happened, nobody linked to Camilla's household would touch the Diana program again. And looked toward Catherine. The ceremony had never been the true target. The target was passing on memory. Diana to William, William to Catherine, Catherine to Charlotte. Someone had tried to break that line before the world could see it. Now William knew, and the sentence Charlotte refused to read was about to change everything. The room stayed silent after William finished reading. Catherine did not ask to see the sentence again. She had understood enough from the way William folded the page, the way Anne's jaw tightened, and the way every official tied to Camilla's household became careful with their words. Then William unfolded it. The disputed line read, "Diana must not be allowed to eclipse the Queen again. Remove Catherine's tribute and keep the girl away from the center." The girl, not Princess Charlotte, not William's daughter, not Diana's granddaughter, the girl. That phrase changed the meaning of everything that had happened before. The changed schedule was no longer a dry fight about timing. It was no longer possible to hide behind ceremony balance or office confusion. The words showed a fear that Diana's memory would move through Catherine and Charlotte in a way no title could control. Catherine looked toward her daughter. Charlotte had not known the whole sentence. She had only seen the start on the damaged copy. Now she understood why the final version had been hidden and why her mother had carried the loss quietly. She had not only been moved down a procession. She had been pushed away from a legacy. William asked who had written the line. Nobody answered in that room. Camilla's people insisted the handwriting needed checking. They said one person could not speak for a whole household. William agreed with one part of that answer. The writing would be examined. The paper trail would be checked. Every person who handled the document would be found, but the ceremony would not wait. William restored Catherine's introduction. Charlotte's place beside the final rose was returned. The film about Diana's work was put back into the program. Final approval returned to William and Catherine's office, and no further change could be made without both signatures. And added one rule of her own. Every future change had to be written down next to the name of the person asking for it. No initials, no fuzzy office codes, no hiding behind the household. The room understood what Anne was doing. She was not only protecting one tribute, she was closing the path that let the changes move through the system without anyone being responsible. Catherine stayed quiet until the officials left. Then she turned to Charlotte. There was no anger in her face, only the tiredness of a mother realizing her child had spent 18 days believing she had to solve an adult problem alone. Catherine told her that courage did not always mean speaking in public. Sometimes courage meant picking the right moment, trusting the right people, and knowing the cost of a truth before letting it out. Charlotte asked whether she had chosen the wrong moment. Catherine shook her head. She said the wrong moment had come weeks earlier, when adults saw what was happening and decided silence was easier. That answer broke the last distance between them. Charlotte said she had been afraid Catherine would be ashamed of her. Catherine pulled her close and told her the shame belonged elsewhere. William watched without interrupting and stood near the table, one hand resting beside the two versions of the program. The evidence had done more than show a hidden order. It had shown a contest over memory, power, and the future image of the royal family. Diana's anniversary was supposed to look back. Instead, it showed what was coming next. A future in which Catherine would not accept every quiet insult to keep someone else comfortable. A future in which Charlotte knew that royal duty did not require surrendering her voice. And a future in which William would ask for names, signatures, and proof before letting any household change the legacy of his mother. Camilla's office denied that the sentence showed her wishes. No public fight followed that evening. No title change, no official announcement named a wrongdoer. But inside the family, the damage had been done. William now held both pages. And held the archive record. Charlotte had the public's attention, and Catherine had stopped carrying the pain alone. The official story from Camilla's side is that this was all a misunderstanding, a thrown-away idea that should never have reached Charlotte. But when you actually look at what was said versus what happened, that explanation falls apart. The document was not an early draft. It was made after the original program was approved. It was not a single copy sitting in someone's desk. It had a fourth distribution circulation code and a matching entry in the master register. It was not unsigned. It had initials and an approval mark. And the missing file in the archive, the one that had been taken, suggests someone knew exactly what was in that folder and tried to make it disappear before anyone could compare the versions. The fact that and found a copy behind another program means the cleanup was not finished. Someone got sloppy or someone got interrupted. Either way, the proof now exists in many forms and William has locked up all of it. What makes this so hard to brush off is that the note did not only target Catherine. It targeted Charlotte by name, or rather by refusing to use her name. Keep the girl away from the center. That is not office language. That is personal. It suggests that whoever wrote this was not just fixing a ceremony. They were trying to stop a certain picture from forming. Diana's granddaughter carrying the final rose, standing beside her mother, introduced by the woman who married Diana's son. That picture would have been strong, and it would have reminded everyone watching exactly whose legacy was being honored. The fact that someone near Camilla saw that picture as a threat tells you everything about how Diana's memory is still being managed inside that family. And here is the part that really sticks with me. Charlotte kept this for 18 days. She watched her mother pretend everything was fine. She watched the program get taken apart piece by piece. She waited for someone else to step in and nobody did. So she walked onto a stage in front of cameras and did it herself. That is not a child acting out. That is a child who saw that the adults around her had decided silence was safer than truth. And when Catherine finally heard what her daughter had done, she did not cry because she was embarrassed. She cried because she understood that her daughter had been carrying the weight of something Catherine had tried to protect her from. The whole thing is a mess of good intentions hitting institutional pressure. And at the center of it are two people who were just trying to honor Diana in a way that felt real. The next development in this story will apparently reveal the name of the person who approved the final circulation at 6:47 that evening, along with 3 words written beside Camilla's private office code. Those 3 words may explain who expected Catherine to stay silent forever. If that is true, then this is not just about a tribute. It is about whether anyone in that household will actually be held responsible for trying to erase Diana's presence from her own anniversary. The investigation is open, the documents are secured, and the story is far from over. But for now, the picture that lingers is Catherine standing beside that stage, holding a folded page against her chest, while her daughter refuses to read the sentence that would have hurt her most. That is the moment everything changed. Not because of what was said, but because of what was finally understood.